Every single Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, we're coming at you with Want to Know Wednesday. Please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, like the video. Your comments drive a lot of this content, so please give me feedback. And if you have something that you want to know for next week's Want to Know Wednesday, let us know. You know, I'm always talking about the 5 things that have helped me have success in business and in real estate. It's learn, find a way to make money, stash money, multiply money, and repeat. And I want to focus on learn because sometimes I just sit here and I say learn, or I go through this list and I don't really go in enough depth or detail. And so, you know, sporadically here over the next few Want to Know Wednesdays, unless you guys have, you know, significant questions you want answered, whatever, but the next 5 straight videos might be on each of these bullet points individually and just taking a lot more time to go and dive deep into them. And today, for learn, I'm actually going to end up sharing the 10 books that have made the biggest impact in my business journey with you and talk a little bit about why they made an impact, how they made an impact, but also I'm going to share some other things that I did to learn. And so learn, let's start with surrounding yourself with the right people. So from when I graduated college, 2012 to like 2018, I hardly ever saw my friends. I was 100,000% focused on where I was going and where I wanted to be 5 years, 10 years. I was setting up the next phase of my life. I had to be careful who I was spending time with. That's not a bash on any of my friends, but I chose to take as much time as I possibly could to be around the people that were already at or well beyond where I wanted to be, or where I was currently at, but also where I wanted to be. And so that meant I was traveling, I was attending conferences, I was going to different seminars. I cast a wide net at first, and that wide net kind of allowed me to get a big enough sample size to then, okay, I narrowed down who I was going to listen to, wasn't going to listen to. When I got to be involved in a business that was scaling from basically $2 million a year in revenue to over $100 million a year annually, I went and showed up to every single meeting. I helped with acquisitions there, I helped with some of the setup of the company, but I went to every single meeting. Even if I wasn't necessarily needed or required to be at certain meetings, I would still show up because I knew that the guys and the people that were going to be at those meetings were ahead of where I wanted to be at that point in time. And some of them were ahead of my next 5-year, 10-year goals. And so I wanted to be able to spend as much time around them as possible to see how they were acting in boardrooms, how they were acting in shareholder meetings, how they thought about the growth of a company, how they thought about the structure of a company, how they thought about positioning the company to be worth its most highest value 5 years, 10 years from now, to then have options to be able to sell it or recapitalize it. I wanted to be in the room. Too many people are scared to show up. They're too scared to commit. I was always going to commit. I was always going to be in the room where the decisions were being made and everything. I mean, there were times where it was like, I don't know if I should even really be in this room. Am I adding any value here? But that's when I would just shut up and I would literally just listen. I would soak it all in. Some of those meetings, I remember sitting there, well, if this was me, and I would just think to myself, I would like, well, if this was me, what would I do? And I would try to do that and question that and ask myself that and get an answer out before an answer around the table came out to see how my answer compared to other guys that were in the room. So I don't care if you have to take money, I don't care if you have to travel, I don't care if you have to trade time or do all 3 of those. You need to get into the room with the person or the people who are already doing what you want to do or doing well beyond what you want to be doing 5 years from now, where you want to be at 5 to 10 years from now. And you need to be in those rooms and you need to soak up as much as you can and you need to apply what is, you know, the parts that are going to work for your business, for your company, to be able to push those things forward. And hopefully what you're going to be able to do is, because you chose to take that flight, because you chose to take that time, because you chose to trade that money for access, hopefully you're going to be able to cut down, you know, if it was going to take you 10 years to reach some goal, hopefully you can cut that down to 2 years. It's possible because you're going to skip there's so much time that can be wasted the first 2 years, 4 years, really hustling and trying to figure out how to do something to realize you did it wrong, and then you have to go recorrect it. Which, hey, there's nothing wrong with taking action, doing it wrong, recorrecting, and going another way. But it's hard enough to find success and accomplish goals going about it with help and learning from somebody and being aware of what to avoid and what mistakes not to make, let alone if you're going to go out and trial and error by yourself. Every time that I've spent the money, spent the time, you know, have decided to commit and travel somewhere to get into a room, it's always accelerated the time it took me to get from point A to point Z. Every single time, no doubt about it. The next thing, okay, people are asking me, what books do you read when you learn? So I kind of got a little cheat sheet here in front of me, and I've read over I can't even tell you how many books I read. I know in college I read around 150 books. My reading has slowed down a little bit these days because now I'm reading operating agreements, I'm reading about opportunities, I'm reading more, current events and how that's going to, what we need to maybe start doing in our business because of it. So I don't necessarily do as much in the reading these types of books that I'm going to share with you anymore because I'm beyond some of the books, in my opinion. Maybe I'm not right there, but I feel like I'm beyond some of these books. So it's harder for me I'm so much in the doing and the scaling and the dirt of it and pushing my company forward 100x that I don't necessarily revert back to these books. But they're a great foundation. It's a lot of these, I took a lot of pieces from these books and I've implemented them over the time, over the last 10 years into my business to help see that growth. So the first one I've got on here is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That book to me was the first one of the first ones that really opened my mindset. What I loved so much about that was how it would talk about your personal balance sheet and adding assets to that balance sheet, like this apartment building behind me, that then will start to pay you every single month, whether you're sleeping, whether you're working, whether you're traveling, whether you're watching a football game. It's going to start to pay you every single month the assets that are on that balance sheet. And then you use your assets and the income from assets to go on vacation. Use the income from assets to pay for your house. That was the biggest lesson that I took away from there, and it was really the first book that really laid it out for me. And then with that book, what I would do, and actually a couple of these books, I'll tell you which ones, but there's a couple of these books that I would actually read once every 6 months to a year upon first reading them, because when you read the book for the first time, if you have relatively little knowledge, like when I first started, I had relatively little knowledge about anything in the business world when I was in college, that I read it the first time and I would just pick up maybe like 1% of the book and understand 1% of the book. But then I read it again and then I understood like 5% of the book. And then I read it again and I understood 15. So every time I would read it, because I was implementing what I was learning, I would understand more of the concepts in the book, which only helped me grow more and more. And I'll still go back and read Rich Dad, Poor Dad just because I love it, maybe once every 18 months to 30 months, and I'll just kind of skip through certain chapters of the book and pick it up. I've actually been reading that book with my daughter as well. So next one, number 2, Trump, Art of the Deal. The reason that I love that book is because he's gone through a lot of the deals that he did in the 70s, 80s in that book and really talked about how he structured them. The structure of that book gave me the structure of how I wrote my book, where I go through every single deal. And so what was most significant for me was that was the first book that realized I could structure deals in an unlimited number of ways. There was no set way to do it. I could do it in a way that just made that deal work and was a win for us once we put it in our asset column. So that's what I took most away from that book is just the creativity of deal making. And that was another one that I would read once every 6 months, once every 18 months. Now I'll read it once every 24 to 36 months, and I'll kind of just pick up a random chapter here or there. And so that's something you can kind of continue to learn from every time that you read it. The next one, 10X by Grant Cardone. The big thing that I learned from this is just massive action. Bigger thoughts will expand your bigger thoughts are going to expand your comfort zone over time, and taking that action expands that comfort zone and also expands the level of success. You can achieve what you want to achieve, what you think is going to be 15 years, 20 years down the road. By aiming bigger, sooner, you're going to be able to achieve those goals a lot faster than you think if you have the right thought process and the right amount of massive action behind those thoughts. So that's why I love that one. Fourth one, Trump, Billionaire, Lessons for Small-Time Investor. The reason that I love this one is because building off of Trump, Art of the Deal, in Trump, Billionaire, Lessons for a Small-Time Investor, he really takes it down to a smaller level or a smaller scale and shows how you can structure things on even smaller deals. And it truly is, he actually wrote that book with one of his attorneys, and it truly is a lot of great lessons for the small-time investor. So someone just starting out, someone that's only got 4 units, someone that owns one business and wants to own 10 businesses. It really gives you a lot of great practical lessons that you can take and apply to help for your growth. Fifth one, Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. The thing that I love about that one is just what it basically, to sum it up for me, what it meant for me is your mindset is going to control everything. And so if your mindset, if it's negative and if there's any hint of negative at all and you're doubting yourself, you're doubting the result you're going to get, the odds are you're not going to get that result. Versus if you can change, and it talks about the power of positive thinking. If you can change the way you think, it's going to change your actions. And if you then have the actions behind the positive thoughts, that's what's going to be drawn into your life. I've used this time and time again where I truly believe that I've thought things into my life and attracted things through thought into my life. Now, it also takes action, but it started with a thought, and then I backfilled it with massive action. Number 6, Think and Grow Rich, which is kind of parallel with number 5, where I put Power of Positive Thinking. So Think and Grow Rich, it's a great book, again, talking about the thoughts that you have. It talks a lot about masterminds and the network that you have and other brain trusts that you're a part of. So again, that kind of goes back to me talking and kicking this video off, talking about who are you around and how can you spend more money to be around more people who have, you know, bigger brain trust. I think about Think and Grow Rich, and it talks a lot about that brain trust and the masterminds in there. And a mastermind is basically a group that, you know, compiles all their thoughts and all their actions and, you know, all their knowledge into one big mastermind. It's why I'm having my mastermind in January, January 12th through the 14th. You can come join our mastermind. It's going to be capped to about 20 to 25 people, 3-day event with me. When I think about Think and Grow Rich, I think about my mastermind, because I'm going to share with you everything that I've learned from all of my mentors over the last 10, 12 years, how I've structured all these deals, and you're going to basically benefit for that. But you're going to trade dollars, you're going to trade some time, and you're going to have to travel to the event. Number 7, The Traveler's Gift, Andy Andrews. So The Traveler's Gift is actually a fiction book, but it's based on different real life events from history. It takes maybe 5, 7, 10 different major historical events and talks about those events. It talks about them basically through the story of this guy who's traveling through time, essentially, and he takes all the things that he learns, and then he basically gets to implement them into his life, and he sees how his life is in the future after implementing these things. And so The Traveler's Gift, what I took, the biggest thing that I took out of that book is there's a chapter about, I think it's a president, I don't remember all the details, but it's just the concept that I remember. And the whole topic was the buck stops with me. The buck stops with you, the buck stops with me. Basically what that means is, like, it's your fault. If something goes wrong, because, you know, you got to take ownership. You got to take accountability. So if I get after him for something, like, he needs to just realize, oh man, it was my fault. And if I'm getting after him, I'm ultimately gonna be like, it was my fault because I hired Danny and put him in that spot. Anyway, so ultimately you're ultimately in control. It's ultimately your fault for everything. But the blessing of that is you then are able to fix it. The more that you deflect and the more that you blame it on other people, you now give up control of the situation. You cannot fix it. And once you give up control, you know, it's a spiral downhill, right? You need to, instead of deflecting, you need to be able to take that on and then move on. So it's a great story, a great gift, and it's a super, super fast read. It's probably the fastest read that's on here, and so that's a great one. Number 8, The Sure Thing by me. That's my book. That's where I go through every single deal that we did through about mid-2020, and I literally break down every single deal, how we structured it, if I have investors or not, if we did have investors, how we structured each of those deals with investors, because they're all a little bit different, and how we just kind of grew through my first basically 7, 8 years of this business. I'm probably gonna have to write a sequel to that at some point, because some of these deals that we've bought since are gonna be some of the most interesting deals and some of the biggest deals and whatever, but The Sure Thing, I know, has helped a lot of people be able to structure some deals for themselves and just to use some of the things that I use to be able to grow. Number 9, Warren Buffett, Snowball. I don't think it's an autobiography, but I think it's a biography on Warren Buffett. And I'm just infatuated with significant results and growth. And Warren and I do different things, obviously. There's a lot of great lessons out of that book. And the title, Snowball, really sums up the entire book. But it's just basically, you know, you start with a penny. And if you do the right thing with that penny, the penny is going to turn into 2 cents, it's going to turn into 4 cents, it's going to turn into 8 cents, you know, 16, 32, 64, eventually it turns into $8 and then $16 and then 32, and just snowballs over time, and it gets to a point where you can't even stop the snowball if you wanted to, and things just keep multiplying and growing. So it's a great book, but it's a very big book, a little bit more complex stuff in there too by the time you hit the middle and the end. Number 10 is called Titan by Ron Chernow. Titan is all about John D. Rockefeller and him building his empire, so it's another big book. The last two I kept for last two because they're probably the hardest reads. And I was already, by the time I picked up those books, I was probably already 60, 70, 80 books in. And so I was well on my way and well into it before I got into some of those books, because they are a little bit harder reads. They are bigger. You know, I think the Titan book is probably 800, 900 pages, something like that. But it's very detailed on John D. Rockefeller's life, the life even of his family and how he grew up and all that stuff. But when it really gets into, you know, talking about how he grew his business, it's very, very interesting. And again, it just shows you a mindset it shows you an infinite mindset and shows you what's possible. So those would be the 10 books I would read. Take the time to pour into yourself. You are your biggest asset. You know, I'm a bigger asset to myself, and my brain is a bigger asset to me than any single one deal. And so you need to be able to invest time, energy, and resources and money into growing yourself, your self-development, because it will pay forever. It will pay you over and over and over and over again. The biggest thing is when you are learning, you need to make sure that you're going to go implement. And then as you start learning and start going down a path, you need to be wary of who you listen to. You can't, over time, you need to narrow the amount of people that you listen to. Otherwise, you're ultimately going to become frozen. Earlier on, cast a wider net until you start to go down a path. As you start to go down that path, that's when you need to narrow in on who and what you're kind of listening to. Go out and grow yourself.